Welcome to Connecticut Politics TV. I am Joe McGuire. My guest today is Terry Cowgill, a contributing op-ed columnist at Connecticut News Junkie. He blogs at Politicon and is the retired managing editor of the Berkshire Edge in Great Barrington, Mass. Always look forward to having great conversations with my buddy Terry Cowgill. Welcome back, Terry.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Joe. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. I follow you on social media, both on Facebook and Twitter, and I got to tell you, anybody who is on those social media sites, they should get in on what you're doing because you're enjoying your retirement, Terry.
I would say I am. I mean, I have more time to get on these platforms and look around and see what you can find. And there's a lot of interesting stuff on there. There's also a lot of garbage that you have to wade through in order to get to the good stuff. But I'm getting better at doing that now, I find, with practice.
Now, I'm a big fan of your writing, have been for quite some time. And you've written some interesting articles, and I just wanted to get into a few of the topics that you've hit recently, including package stores, which is kind of a very unique business practice that most people outside of Connecticut, you say package store, they don't even know what you're talking about. But they're run they run differently than liquor stores, and there's all sorts of different rules with these guys.
Yeah, they're called package stores in Massachusetts, and I believe in Rhode Island also, but that's about it. There are liquor stores everywhere else,
right?
But it's a strange, and we have an even stranger system than the other states, right? We regulate our package stores like we regulate nothing else. Even the new cannabis industry isn't as regulated as the package stores, believe it or not. They are forbidden from having sale items. They might be able to have one or two a month, or it's a joke. They have minimum pricing, right? Which means they don't have to compete with one another. Which isn't that great? I mean, I'd love to have a deal like that. They have that. They used to be that they could not open on Sundays. And believe it or not, the package store owners liked it that way because they didn't want it to compete with one another by opening on Sundays. One guy opens, the other one doesn't. So they also have a monopoly on the sale of anything other than beer. You can buy beer in supermarkets in Connecticut. You cannot buy wine. You cannot buy spirits. And they're trying to the grocery store lobby, which is pretty big in Connecticut, and it consists a lot of Stop and Shop and Big Y and Whole Foods and places like that. They want to be able to sell wine. And it seems like a perfectly reasonable request to me, but the package store lobby is coming out full force against this. They resist any efforts at reform, and they insist that any reformation of these antiquated laws will put half of them out of business. They always exaggerate. They said this about the Sunday openings. They said it about just about any proposal that comes through. And of course, it didn't happen with Sunday openings. But that's what they say, and that's their position. I don't know whether this will make it out of the General Assembly and get passed or not, but I'm glad that they're trying at least because I think it's long overdue. Jesus, you go to any other state, I think 42 states allow the sale of wine in grocery stores, and Connecticut is one of the few. And so I think they should. This is ridiculous.
Especially for a state that's known for being so liberal, we have very conservative laws when it comes to the consumption of alcohol. And you sort of alluded to it, but the Connecticut Package Stores Association, which has about 1,200 members, they don't want anything different than what they've been doing. They're just not fans of change at all, apparently.
They have a good deal. That's why, nobody wants to compete more, but as I've said to my friends in the package store industry before, I still have a few friends, believe it or not, but can you imagine? And one of the problems is they say, well, if we should be the only ones allowed to sell wine because if somebody else sells it, it might put us out of business. And I said, well, I was in the newspaper business for a long time. And you know what killed the newspaper industry? The loss of classified advertising, which accounted for like half the revenues in the typical newspaper. And I never would have proposed that only newspapers be allowed to sell classifieds. And Craigslist, let's ban them. We don't need Craigslist. We don't want them.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's crazy. But they have a very strong lobby. This Connecticut Package Store Association with Carol Hughes, who was the longtime executive director. He was a very effective lobbyist for a long time. He died, I think, a couple of years ago. I believe his wife is still involved, and maybe some of the family is. They're very good at what they do. I admire them, even though I disagree with them. I admire their effectiveness because they managed to put a hold on the legislature. It's very difficult to pass this reformation.
Amazingly, 84% of Connecticut residents in one study were for grocery stores selling wine. Thousands of jobs would be created as a result of doing this. And so the idea that it has no chance to get through the legislature is speaks testaments about this lobbyist.
Well, you know why that is that most of the liquor stores in Connecticut, most of the package stores are mom and pop operations, right? So everybody knows somebody in a small town somewhere who owns a package store, and they try to envision this person being put out of business by Whole Foods or Stop and Shop selling these mass producing. And I was always saying to myself, I think what they can do, what the package store owners can do, is offer a level of expertise that your local Stop and Shop doesn't have, right? And you can offer varieties that they don't have, and they can sell. I think part of this bill allows them to sell more foods than they would have been able to do before. And so, cheeses and snacks and that kind of thing. So I really don't think it's going to put supermarkets out of business. And, in Massachusetts, they do allow wine sales in grocery stores. In fact, in some cases, they actually allow liquor sales in grocery stores. But there's still 700 package stores in Massachusetts. So somehow they survived. I don't know, but maybe they got inventive. Maybe they found ways to compete, and that's the idea, right?
Yeah, I guess it's interesting the way government works, and something as simple as the people want it, and it makes a lot of sense economically. You get the right union fighting against something, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, well, anytime you have a well-funded lobby. And it's not just well-funded, actually, because really, the Grocery Store Association, I think it's called the Connecticut Food Association, they have plenty of money. They have more money probably than the Package Stores Association, but they still can't crack this nut. Or I think it's going to be difficult for them to do. So it's not always money, but it's influence. And as I said earlier, everybody knows a package store owner somewhere, and nobody wants them to go out of business because they see them in church every Sunday. They see them at the post office, and they're like, they know their kids from high school and yada yada. So it's very personal. And if you come out for reform, people take it personally. I've been attacked on social media by package store owners, and they're a real fierce bunch. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, they seem like they would be. You also recently wrote about the General Assembly just approved a new 4-year contract for state police. It gets retroactive to last July. $46.7 million in the first 3 years, according to the Office of Fiscal Analysis. But these guys went out and supported Bob Stefanowski in the last election, who was running around talking about rampant crime and that horrible police accountability bill. This is the General Assembly and the governor, playing nice, trying to turn the relationship around with the state police, you think?
Well, I think so. I liken it to, actually, I didn't do this in the column. I should have thought of it, but I liken it. You're a sports guy, right? You and Paul Pacelli are big sports guys. I know that. But I liken it to a get-even call in basketball. The official makes a bad call at one end of the court, and then they go down to the other end, and he makes another bad call just to allow, in terms of fairness, just want to have the other team get even. And that's sort of the way I look at it here. This police reform law, police accountability law, was uniformly opposed by police all across the country. And the Connecticut State Police most of the rank and file were just like, this is crazy. But, when it comes time to make everybody feel good again, you can always open the state's wallet and it will make them feel good, because there's nothing to make you feel better about yourself when you think you've been aggrieved than a nice big fat check. And not that anybody's going to get rich from being a state trooper, but still, it helps dull the pain. If not only is this retroactive, this pay increase, but there are immediate bonuses for everyone, including new recruits and including current troopers. So this is a good thing. I think there's going to be a lot of troopers taking a lot of nice vacations in the next few months, and good for them. They work hard. They deserve it.
They certainly do deserve it. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I guess here's the other thing too. Speaking of that police accountability bill, and I think you and I have discussed this before, it's not what a lot of people make it out to be. And if you're doing your job properly as a police officer or as a state trooper, there's no issue with this police accountability bill, right? It's really only if you're one of the bad guys where you're accountable for your actions.
Yeah, what they were most opposed to was the limitations imposed on qualified immunity, which is the idea that you can't really that you can't really sue the police unless they're guilty of, unless you think or allege that they committed gross crimes against you or in just huge amounts of negligence. And those standards will be relaxed somewhat, but still, you're still going to have the backing of your police force. And it's not like you're going to have to hire your own lawyer and stuff. I mean, there's a lot of reason for concern, and I understand that. But I think they'll be okay. I really think it was much ado about nothing in terms of the qualified immunity, but that was the big issue that they were most opposed to.
Yeah, Bob Stefanowski certainly highlighted that over and over again. Again, this idea that, the Democrats are pro-criminal and that this bill was just another step towards, I don't know. I'm sure you see the same stuff where, Waterbury, I think, had a big bust the other day, and all the comments on their Facebook page were, well, I'm sure that guy will be out tomorrow. Ned Lamont wants to waive the guy's bail. And I mean, right. It is just utter nonsense. And I talked to a lot of Democrats on this show and on the radio. And I mean, I feel stupid having to ask them this. Like, are you guys really like pro-criminal? And of course they're not. I think the Republicans need a better talking point, clearly, because that didn't work. But
yeah. If there's one thing that liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans can agree on, it's that they don't like crime. And they particularly don't like being victimized by crime. So they all agree on that. It's just a question of what you do to address crime, try to reduce it. And yeah, you're right. I mean, Stefanowski was very pro-police on this. Interestingly, he did not get the endorsement of the Connecticut State Police Union. They decided not to endorse it all this year, which was kind of interesting because they had endorsed Lamont 4 years ago, but they decided not to this year. I figured they would have endorsed Stefanowski. I thought it was kind of interesting that they decided not to. Maybe they figured that he couldn't win, and they didn't want to go on record as supporting him and then having Lamont in there. And maybe he would do some things that they didn't like because he didn't get their support. We can only guess.
Ned seems like he can be petty.
Well, I don't know. I mean, he's worked in the world of high finance and he's got tons of money himself. So I'm sure he's dealt with a lot of, ruthless people over the years. Probably a lot of people in private equity and those people in Shark Tank. So yeah, I'm sure he's used to it.
I think, one of my favorite election moments, and it really, I don't think got the attention I believe it deserved, was when Bob Stefanowski suggested that Ned Lamont was going to bury an FBI investigation looking into his corrupt administration.
Yeah, that's rough. It really is. It's one of those things where it's sort of guilt by association. There were some problems with the some elements of state government, the New London State Pier, and there was this school construction aid package that had some corrupt elements to it, and they were trying to sort of tie him to that. And a lot of it's insinuation. I mean, you can say the bottom line is, or Harry Truman said, the buck stops here, and that's true. But I don't see this as a case of Lamont giving a wink and a nod to criminals. Like, oh, okay, it's okay, you can do this, and I'm not going to do anything. Ned Lamont is not John Rowland.
Yeah.
So it's pretty clear. I mean, one of the big differences, obviously, between the two is Ned Lamont already has tons of money. You can't bribe him. He's
Right.
worth. He and his wife are net worth of. They're billionaires essentially, and there's just no way you're not going to bribe him. A guy like John Rowland is always hustling. He's a social climber and economic climber and everything else, and he had his hand out, unfortunately. But I don't see that with Ned. I really don't see him as being corrupt. He can be ineffective, I think, at times, but he's not a bad guy, I don't think.
John Rowland, hustler. I like that.
Yeah.
That's a very, very accurate description.
I was on his show several times, actually, when he was on WTIC.
Yeah.
Two of those times I was in the studio for 2 hours at a time. For some reason, he liked me, and I don't know why, because I've written critically about him before. And it almost made me change my opinion of him because he was willing to have me on, even though I wrote some icky things about him.
Well, you know what? Honestly, I think if John Rowland didn't have on people who wrote bad about him, he'd have nobody on.
Yeah.
That's his other situation. The other thing about as far as the police are concerned is, a report came out about 8 weeks ago showing that being a police officer in Connecticut is probably the best place that you can do it in terms of your own safety. Now, in terms of salary, we take pretty good care of our police in this state. And obviously, there was the Bristol shooting this year where we lost a couple officers, but for the most part, Connecticut's a great place for police.
Yeah, it is a pretty good place to be a police officer. That's true. They have a very good deal. And in addition to being, Connecticut is a fairly safe place. The worst crime is in the cities, where the police don't have a very strong presence in the cities. It's mostly municipal police in Hartford, Bridgeport, New Haven, Waterbury, places like that. So yeah, it is. And also, you have pretty good job security. They have very strong unions. And it used to be you could retire with a full pension after only 20 years. They changed that in the last collective bargaining agreement. It's now up to 25, which is still a pretty good deal. I mean, if I'd been able to retire after 25 years, I could have retired at like, I don't know, 40. Wouldn't that have been nice? I could have founded Twitter.
Right. Speaking of your retirement, I guess you've always had a fascination with sanitation.
Yeah.
You've taken a part-time job in your retirement. You want to talk a little bit about that? I was fascinated by that, and I kind of get it.
Yeah. Well, it serves two purposes. Yeah, I am fascinated by the subject. I've written about the solid waste industry, and it really does seem like it's just a business that is well, it's crying out for a solution, because there are no good solutions at this point. Because really, what do we do? The towns, they were all belong to MIRA, which is the former CRRA, which is that waste authority, quasi-public waste authority in Hartford. All of that waste from those towns used to go to an incinerator, a trash to energy incinerator in Hartford. It would get turned into, they get burned and get turned into energy, and that was the solution. But that plant costs like $300 million to fix it now. It's just in terrible shape. So the state balked at funding that. So now all of the towns are scrambling to figure out, what what the hell do we do with our garbage? And right now, it's at least in our town, it's going to a landfill near, I think it's just outside of Scranton, Pennsylvania. And what we really have to do, and everybody has to do, you want to reduce the amount of garbage coming in there by recycling whenever you can, and also by composting food waste. Food waste is because towns get charged by the ton to dispose of the garbage, right? Food waste is the heaviest thing that people put in the garbage. So if you can compost or separate it out, and we have a compost program there at the transfer station where I work, and you can bring your food scraps and put them in this, couple of bins that are there. And that's what we have to do, because there really are no long-term solutions here. Nobody really has a solution. And Governor Lamont has addressed this numerous times, as have people in the legislature. But no, I sit in the toll booth. So I do this a couple times a week. Right. So I'm there, and people come in, and they stop and say hello. In some cases, a lot of them are my neighbors. But we have different fees for the disposal of different things, such as construction and demolition. That's the most expensive one. And that's always a very touchy, if you want to tell somebody, well, gee, it's going to cost you $150 to get rid of all that junk in the back of your pickup truck. They're like, what? I had no idea. And the people who come in without their stickers, and they all have the same excuse. Oh, my windshield is cracked, or my car's in the shop. And a lot of times they're telling the truth, but there's got to be a certain percentage who are not. And so, really, what can you do if we stopped and inspected every vehicle? We could do that, but then the whole system would collapse, So we have to rely sort of on the honor system, a combination of the honor system and deterrence. And I find it fascinating. And also, I'm reconnecting with all of these people in town that I lost touch with after spending 8.5 years up in the Berkshires. So it's like a perfect retirement job for me.
Yeah, that is really cool. First of all, I was thinking about, again, having read the article, food waste being the heaviest thing in the garbage. And I've got a family of 6 here. We're dumping a lot of trash, and a lot of it is food waste. And so, yes, we got a guy here in Wethersfield at the town dump who goes through all of your stuff and prices you out and everything. And he's great. Everybody loves the guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally get it. He's like the assistant mayor of town, the unofficial mayor, I should say.
Yeah. Well, everybody loves me too when they come through there, except the package store owners.
Yeah. Let's talk about marijuana. It's legal here in the state of Connecticut, and it seems like it's going well right now. There's still a lot of people who don't understand marijuana, which is still a Schedule I drug. I know you find that to be absurd, which is in the same classification as heroin and LSD and ecstasy and actual drugs. For the people who are against marijuana, you kind of point out in the article, people are going to smoke marijuana, and it just makes sense. I mean, looking at what's going on in Colorado and how they've done it and what they've been able to do as far as financing their education system off the sale of marijuana, I think it's a good thing for Connecticut.
Yeah, I mean, as I point out, at this point, it's kind of moot. If you want to say, oh, gee, we don't need more stoned people on the roads, or we don't want kids to get a hold of it and stuff. Yeah, those things are all true. But Connecticut continuing to maintain a prohibition on marijuana is not going to accomplish any of those things. Because, literally now we're surrounded by states that have legalized it. Rhode Island and New York most recently, and Massachusetts. When I was working up there, they passed a referendum, citizens referendum, 2016, and the first store opened I think it's sometime in the late 2018. So they've been at it for quite a while, and so people are going to get it, no matter whether you legalize it or not here. And it's not that far a drive to go up to Northampton or Great Barrington or someplace like that. And so really, I think that what you want to do is just manage the situation better. And as far as I'm concerned, people looking for pot, let's get them off the road for as much as we can. So if somebody lives in Wethersfield where you live, and they only have to drive as far as Hartford or Glastonbury or someplace to get it, that's great. Isn't that better than having them drive up to Springfield or Northampton? That's a
Yeah.
lot farther, a lot more time to spend on the road. Maybe you smoke a joint on the way back. I don't know, but I think it's a good idea. And I mean, I understand the arguments against them and stuff, but my kids were in high school not that long ago. They knew who was selling it at their high school. It was not hard to get. You could meet the guy in the bathroom or in the McDonald's parking lot after school, and it was easy to get. So if they wanted it, they could get it, and it wasn't regulated. Of course, it could have been laced with stuff. You have no idea.
Right.
This way, it's safer. And that's not to say it's infallible, but there's a problem in some states now with the economic model behind the legal pot. And I just read an editorial in the Wall Street Journal today chronicling some of the problems they've had in California, where the state government has imposed taxes that are so high that they can't compete with the black market. So they're having all these problems with black market weed. So there's a lesson to be learned there. The government shouldn't get too greedy in the way they tax this stuff, because if you do, the black market is bound to start back up again. And unfortunately, a lot of people in government, too many people, in my view, don't really understand markets. And they just figure, the government can basically control most things, but when it comes to markets and Yankee ingenuity and a way to meet a need and make money off of it, they can't really control that very well. So that's a cautionary tale.
Yeah, I mean, I think the black market for marijuana has been thriving for decades, sort of like the mafia. You could be as well intentioned as you want. I think there's just certain elements that have been so firmly entrenched for so long that if you're the government right now, you're kind of cutting in on that market as opposed to the black market developing based off of your market.
Yeah. No, that's true. I think the government needs to they need to be involved, but they also need to know when to get out of the way. And in this case, certainly in California, they have overreached. And whenever and so some of the big some of the big companies in California that came in there to start these big grow facilities have pulled out. They've left the state. So not only do they have a problem with the black market, they're going to have the state-sponsored, state-regulated stores. They're not going to have enough product. They're probably going to have some shortages, and that will drive even more people to the black market.
The other thing about the marijuana market that maybe people who are not pro the marijuana movement here, $1 billion in revenue over the first 4 years, 17,000 pretty good paying jobs. As far as the economic effect that legalized marijuana will have in Connecticut, it's you sort of pointed out, it's getting harder and harder to rely on that casino money. The casino money seems to be dipping.
Yes, well, certainly the state's share of the state makes money off of the two Indian casinos because 30 years ago, when the Weicker administration negotiated this deal with the two Indian tribes, I believe that the state collects 25% of the annual slot revenues in both casinos. And yes, those have gone down because there's lots of other ways now to bet or to gamble if you want to. And now with the legalization of sports betting, that takes away a lot of that, I think. And of course, they really got hammered during the pandemic. They had to close down for quite a while, and casinos just seem like super spreader places. So it was really hard. I think that they had a tough time, even when they did reopen. They had a tough time bringing people back. So yeah, they got problems with revenues coming in there. Now, of course, there was a Yukon economist, Fred Carstensen. You probably heard of him. He's very, very well respected, and he predicted that his study predicted anyway that there'd be revenues of the state would get revenues of up to $1 billion over the first 4 years of sale, along with roughly 17,000 decent paying jobs with benefits. So that's not chicken feed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I still talk to, and again, I think it's as you mentioned earlier, again, it being a Schedule I drug for people who've never or have never been around marijuana, they don't understand. You talked about this Montville police sergeant. Again, sort of, there's no real way to know if someone is driving while they're high on marijuana, short of the car being filled with smoke. It doesn't have the same effects as what you might find for somebody who's drinking and driving.
Right. And it's pretty easy actually to tell somebody's drunk when you pull them over, right? I mean, you do the field sobriety test, you check the vehicle for smells, you have them walk the straight line, you have them close the eyes and touch their nose. There's all kinds of ways you can do that. You can check their speech, but marijuana does not affect your balance and your reflexes to nearly the same extent that alcohol does. At least marijuana in moderation does not. So they have what they call these drug detection experts now, and I'm a little skeptical of it, frankly. I don't know how well they can do this. They can detect cannabis in the bloodstream if they do, medically. But the problem is cannabis stays in the bloodstream for a long time. So you can be completely sober, not under the influence of cannabis at all, but it's still in your blood. Whereas alcohol, it tends to, it makes you go to the bathroom so much that it passes through you relatively quickly, but not cannabis. So yeah, they've got that problem. And but I'll tell you what, if I had to share the road, I want to share the road with sober people. Let me be clear. But if I had to share the road with some guy who's moderately drunk and some guy who's moderately stoned, I'll take the stoner anytime.
Yeah,
they're not as reckless. They drive slower, and I mean, well, that's just me. I've been through. I went to high school in the '70s, so there was a lot of mischief going on.
Terry, I saw this study that they did on CNN 4 or 5 years ago. I was watching this, and they had a closed course circuit set up, police officer, and they had 5 or 6 people, young man, young woman, older man, older woman, just a couple different races, just different demographics of people. And they had them smoke marijuana, get in the car, and drive the obstacle course.
All right.
And almost all of those people got through the obstacle course a minimum of 12 times before they even remotely got the police officer like, well, that was a little sketchy there. There was one guy who smoked, oh my God, like 5 or 6 joints and joked. He was like, I actually showed up here stoned.
Yeah.
He was on like his 25th or 26th lap and just smoking more and more. And the cop was like, nah, he's good. There'd be no reason to pull this guy over. People, as you said, it's a different high. It's a different effect that it has on people. I agree with you. I would much rather be on the road with stoners than, drunk people tend to, really not have their cognitive abilities being the sharpest in those moments. So,
yeah.
They do. I assume they're going to come up with something somewhere along the way. Again, I mean, I think when someone's smoking and driving, literally, it becomes easy to smell that because that's a pretty potent smell in a car.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's very difficult to get rid of too. I mean, it can get into the fabrics of the vehicle, and just like tobacco can. So, and if people do new cars still have ashtrays? I don't even know if they do, but
I just got a new car about a month ago, and no, it does not.
It does not. Did I have a cigarette? Well, they still have cigarette lighter ports because they're good for power ports, right? They still have
Yes,
those. Yeah.
they still have that. Yeah, but no, they didn't have the old pull-out ashtray.
Yeah.
Those are also, a relic of back of the day. That's so
Absolutely.
weird that I mean, that like came standard in cars for so long, even when cigarettes were like kind of banned everywhere.
Oh, it was I mean, I was a kid in the 60s and the 70s. And the one thing some of my recollections of some of those days are it's kind of vague. The one thing I do remember is the smell of cigarette smoke was everywhere. I mean, people smoked in hospitals and elevators, movie theaters, restaurants, any public place, in airplanes, and any public place they would light up. And I'm so glad we're beyond those days. You know, it was just horrible. And or you go, you take you take a suit to the cleaners, and the dry cleaners smoked like a chimney, so you'd bring it back and be all clean. It smelled like cigarettes, smelled like an ashtray. So glad that's over. Oh.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things we can all agree on. That as a society, it's kind of nice that we move forward from that. I remember, being in high school and hanging out at the local friendlies, and I smoked cigarettes, and we'd be sitting in the smoking section, which was right next to the non-smoking section, which, for all intents and purposes, was really all the same thing.
Yeah.
So you and I, we've taken some flack from people for some things that we've talked about in the past, and I enjoy that, and I know you're quite a figure on the social media, especially on Twitter. I know you're one who gets a lot of trolls in your world as well.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to your colleague Barketh the other day. And we were talking about media literacy, which is something he both teaches and has recently written about. And some of this stuff that's going on right now, kind of looking more at the national stuff, M&Ms and gas stoves. I think we continue to see, especially with the right-wing media, so much stuff that is clearly meant to be divisive. And I'm curious your thoughts on, does this society have any chance of sort of patching the partisan divide that we suffer from?
Not in the immediate future, no. And not as long as we have, Twitter and Facebook and all these other media, because anybody can sound off, and people can do so under the cloak of anonymity, secure in the knowledge that they can say the nastiest thing and nobody's going to punch them in the nose or anything. So no, I don't think so. In terms of the concepts you were talking about earlier, like the wokeness and stuff. I don't know if you saw Sarah Huckabee Sanders' response to the President Biden's State of the Union address last night.
Yeah,
she must have mentioned the word woke. I don't know how many times. It went on and on. In the speech, beyond that, it was sort of like Trump's American Carnage speech. The inauguration speech.
Yep.
He painted this incredibly dark, depressing picture of what's going on in the country. She did the same thing last night. You would think that we're all living in a hellscape, and
right.
it's all one man's fault and on one party's fault, and that's it. It's absolutes, and it's really. I just get sick of it. I really do. And I try to be a voice of reason when I'm out there, debating people, because I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I'm a pragmatist. I like to do what works. And, sometimes Republicans have good ideas. Sometimes the Democrats have good ideas. right now the Republicans don't seem to have any ideas.
Yeah.
They're very focused in Congress on investigations. They want to do this committee on the weaponization of the government. I mean, what kind of broad mandate is that? My God, they
Yeah.
could investigate anyone or anything, it seems. And these are not the kind of things that improve the lives of their constituents. I follow Elise Stefanik. I probably shouldn't. The congressman from upstate New York. I know a lot of people who live in her district, so I follow her, and she's now the chair of the House Republican Conference, and she is just relentless. She doesn't talk about issues at all. It's all about the corruption at Hunter Biden's laptop and the Biden crime family and the FBI, and she just goes on and on and on about this stuff. So I'm not hopeful for the immediate future. What I would love is if people who are the worst offenders on Twitter and other places would just get tired of it and go off. But I just think it's a pastime for some people. They like to get on there and troll people, see if they can get a reaction. And now, with ChatGPT and these other artificial intelligence, and we already have bots putting up tweets. And now with some of these, I mean, it's amazing. You're going to have bots where some of these remarks and tweets are done in reaction to something else in real time from a Chat GPT element that actually does read the previous comments and refer back to them. And now, of course, BuzzFeed has said this is where I've got to have this conversation with Bart, who is brilliant, by the way. He knows so much about media literacy. It's just phenomenal. He's a great resource. But BuzzFeed is now saying that they're going to have ChatGPT writing some of their articles on their site. Right? Wow. So you could be getting this. And for the uninitiated, I mean, ChatGPT is a form of artificial intelligence where you can ask it a question or ask it to write a story on something, and it'll come up with text. Sometimes it's actually surprisingly good. Sometimes it's just way off. But BuzzFeed is actually going to be having some of these ChatGPT bots write some of the stories on it. And then you get in it. If a lot of news outlets do this, you're going to get into this bizarre cycle where ChatGPT creates these articles, and then if you go on to Google or someplace, or you ask ChatGPT a question, ChatGPT is going to aggregate all of these news articles that were written by ChatGPT. So you get into this bizarre cycle where we're just going to be relying on robots for like half of our information. And so this really scary sort of 1984 Orwell kind of stuff,
Well, yeah, it's funny you say that because, I remember I got into radio in 1997 and they were already starting with all the automation. And one of my first days in the radio business, somebody was like, man, there won't be any jobs in 20 years. And, the business has certainly evolved. We're doing a lot more stuff like this. I do a lot of podcasting. You sort of keep up with whatever the technology is, but I just always assumed that, what we do, you writing and me doing radio and stuff like this, that it was sort of safe from the robot takeover, that you can automate a lot of things, but like creative content creation, I guess you would call it, it seemed like something that was safe from the robots. And obviously even that now is off the table.
Right. Well, they've had this sort of crude artificial intelligence for several years. You could take an AI platform and have them look at, say, well, you're a sports guy again, have them look at like a box score from a baseball game. And they could write a 2 or 3 paragraph story using the box score or a line score, maybe in baseball, but nothing like what's happening now. I mean, this is just amazing. And they can even write poetry. In in different like in iambic pentameter or something. This is unbelievable. And it's a fascinating time in which to live. And as I said, I mean, I grew up in the 60s and 70s when, I mean, it would have taken, this phone is, in order to fit all of the data in the storage and the computing power of this phone in the 70s, you would have needed something like the size of a warehouse to hold all of the hardware for it. And we just advanced so far now that it's almost frightening. And where can we go from here? That's the thing, is that we've come so far. What does the future hold for technology and for us and the way we communicate? I mean, how is it actually going to get, rise to another level even beyond this? I mean, I can't imagine where it goes.
Yeah, it's amazing. Interestingly enough, talking about Twitter and Facebook, but TikTok, which the young kids are big on. I just saw an article recently. 1 in 5 pieces of content on TikTok is false information or misinformation of some sort. And I'm not sure if how aware you are of TikTok, but the algorithm that is used in the United States and the one that's used in China are very different. The TikTok of China is one that shows children achieving things and celebrates adults who are successful.
Yeah.
It's not the garbage that they're feeding our kids. So we're seeing that thing be weaponized against us.
Yeah. Well, they're trying to dumb us down. It's not that hard when you have a lot of willing people. But yeah, that's the thing about we're all worried about this big white balloon that China, or maybe it's a weather balloon. That was the official explanation. But with, oh my God, it's going to collect all this data. It's flowing over a sensitive missile operation in Montana. Well, meanwhile, I mean, the government of China basically owns TikTok, and they mine our data all the time. And why aren't we concerned about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Selective outrage, to me, is the worst kind. And I've been telling anybody who's upset about this Joe Biden classified information situation, if 5 months ago when the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago, if you didn't care about that, shut up is what I say. You've nothing to be upset about. You're clearly choosing the uniform and not the crime. I mean, and I could tell you this. We have a classified information problem in this country with our leaders, both sides, and it's got to be figured out.
Well, there's overclassification in the in the federal government is rampant, and we've known that for a while. And I think a lot of that is just out of an abundance of caution. I think some of it might be just CYA covering your posterior. But nonetheless, it's when this whole thing broke and Trump, they raided Trump's estate in Palm Beach, and then with Biden and his classified documents, and then the former Vice President Mike Pence comes out, oh yeah, I have them too. And I wrote on the time, I commented on the New York Times article. I said this is getting ridiculous. It's like a circular AA confessional. Hi, I'm Mike, and I have classified documents. It was getting ridiculous, and I'm sure there's lots of others who. The most egregious case of it, by the way, I don't know if you remember Sandy Berger, who was Bill Clinton's national security advisor.
Yep.
He grew up in the next town over from me. I interviewed him once for half an hour. He came back for a high school reunion. Really nice guy. But he, after he got out of the national security business, was a private citizen. He went into the National Archives and he saw some documents, the classified documents that he won. He like stuffed them down his pants and he walked out of the archives. They sent people after him. And he's like, he's running down the street with documents stuffed in his pants. I'm thinking this is absolutely insane. And he was charged and he paid a fine. I don't think he had to go to jail, but there are consequences for this thing, but it doesn't look like any of the major elected officials that we've seen recently are going to face any consequences for this. I don't think Donald Trump will. His main threat, I believe, comes from the investigation of his finances in the state of New York and in the city of New York. The district attorney, there's a lot of that stuff going on. But that was, I couldn't believe that when I heard about Sandy Berger, because when I interviewed him, I spent about an hour with him. And I said, this is one of the most level-headed people I ever met in my life. I couldn't, I just thought, wow, the government needs more people like Sandy Berger, not fewer. Right. And then I heard about this, and I thought, he just must have had an episode or something.
Yeah, totally understandable. What did you think of the State of the Union? Did you think it was pretty much what you expected it was going to be? Nothing overly inspiring.
No, not really. It's hard for him to be inspiring. He's 80 years old, and it's tough. I think he hit the right notes. And look, in terms of getting legislation passed, he has been pretty successful at it. And you may not like the legislation that got passed, but he's gotten some big things done, including most recently this big infrastructure bill, this Build Back America plan, a Build Back Better plan. And, that is one thing that Republicans and Democrats can agree on. They do like infrastructure, and nobody wants to drive on roads and bridges that are falling apart. So, he has been, the thing that I find really interesting, I put up something on this on Twitter. If he does run for re-election, and I guess he will, I think the best thing for him to do would be to bow out. I don't think we want to see a guy in his 80s and get sick or die or something, and it would just cause chaos because this is an old guy, and he's just frankly he's just not that sharp anymore, and it happens to all of us. I don't feel as sharp as I did even 10 years ago, but then that led me to think, what happens? He's running for re-election. If he does, is he going to keep Kamala Harris on the ticket? And I think that's a really tricky question, because the relationship clearly just hasn't worked out. By any objective measure, it hasn't worked. They barely knew each other. They never bonded. And then the question is, does he want to keep her on the ticket? Because if he dropped her from the ticket, it would create a huge backlash. And I've seen this in the New York Times, Boston Globe. Both had columns recently by people saying, well, the only reason people are critical of Kamala Harris is that, she's a black woman, and they're not comfortable with that. So anytime you are critical of a woman who's a person of color, it's very complicated. And I think a lot of people are reluctant to weigh in just because, it gets very uncomfortable. And but I think that I just don't think that she's acquitted herself terribly well, but that may not be fair to her. I just don't know all of the inner workings. But will he keep her on the ticket? I think that's the question I have at this point.
That's interesting. I do think if he runs, he would keep. When's the last? Do you remember when the last time somebody switched up vice presidents, an incumbent? I feel like it's been a long time. That would be interesting to see that, because
when it was Roosevelt.
Okay.
His last term, I forget who his vice president was, but he did not retain him on the ticket, and he took in Harry Truman. And Truman, as you know, Roosevelt, his last term, he never should have been reelected for a fourth term, because his health was so poor that he could barely attend the inauguration, and he died within about 3 or 4 months of being inaugurated for a fourth term. It was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think that was the last time when a vice president was actually dropped from the ticket. It's the last time I can remember, but I don't remember that vice president's name because I'm an old man like Joe Biden.
Oh my goodness, too funny. Terry, I got to tell you, man, always love talking to you. I love the articles. And I always appreciate you giving me your time and your insight on a wide range of topics.
We're game.
Well, I do really appreciate it. Again, as always, Terry Cowgill. Give him a follow on Twitter at Terry Cowgill. You and I will talk again very soon, my friend.
Okay, Joe. Take care of yourself.
You too. All right, well, that is going to do it for today's show. I am Joe Aguirre. Have a great evening, and thank you for watching Connecticut Politics TV. For all the latest interviews and analysis, you can visit us online at ctpolitics.tv, and make sure you follow us on Twitter at ctpoliticstv. Have a great night.